Today we all understand narrative therapy, including myself.
Are you ready?
Yes. Right, today we're talking about narrative therapy. Narrative therapy is an Australian therapy. It's created by Michael White, who is an Australian, and he lives in Perth, so on that side of the world, which is basically a world in its own. Today we're just going to go through what is narrative therapy. You're going to have an assessment coming up when you've got to do 5 or 6A, their pracs. They've changed it around, so you've got 3 different scenarios: domestic violence, grief and loss, and a third one which I can't remember. But you're welcome to choose whichever therapy you want to choose. So not in the past we specifically had to do CBT and PCT. If this one is, you've got a choice. So you might even want to do narrative therapy. Tuesday's role play. I'm going to do narrative therapy role play. So we're going to have a situation and we're going to do these principles on Tuesday. So Tuesday you're going to see this in action. That's what we're talking about today. So okay, fine. Let's start. Narrative therapy. Narrative therapy seeks to be a respectful, non-blaming approach to counseling and community work, which centers people as the experts of their own life. So that's also something we got from Carl Rogers. Carl Rogers says that a person is the expert of their own life, or a person is the expert of their own story. So you as a counselor cannot make assumptions about the person's life. So sometimes you sit there and you're like, I think this is what's happening in his life. I think he's got father issues or mother issues. You're not the expert. So you have to leave the client to reveal that as time goes on. Or maybe that's not the case at all. So don't ever assume. So the client is the expert. So with narrative therapy, we take different sort of skills and we look at their belief system and the issues they have, and we use these skills to listen to the story. Narrative therapy is exactly what it is. It's talking about the narrative. It's about the story. So where the other techniques focus on a lot of the problems, narrative focus on the person's story. So the person tells you their life story, and as they tell their life story, they reveal issues, and we start to work with these issues or the problems. And again, as Carl Rogers says, the person is not the problem is the problem. So don't ever, and that's one thing that's great about narrative, is it actually gets to a place where they kind of distance the problem from the person, which is a great tool, because some people believe that they're the problem or they're the issue, where when we take this technique we actually separate the two, and the person gets to realize that they have a problem, they are not the problem. So so this is a bit of narrative. So it always maintains a stance of curiosity and always asking questions to which you generally do not know the answers. So you asking questions, so you're curious. The person that I used to go to, my previous clinical supervisor, liked to use the words when I speak to him about something. He would always say to me, I'm curious. I'm curious about what's happening for you while you're busy telling me the story. So the same thing with your client is, when you talk to your client, can you tell me about this, because I'm a bit curious now. You mentioned that. Do you want to explore that more? Do you want to tell me more? It's like what's happening in your world, and I'm curious. So I'm asking curious questions the whole time to you. Invite you to read, okay, it's the book, I'll show you later reference to the specific book, which you can actually buy online, about specifically narrative therapy. And this book is also great. It's got different stories or different scenarios in. Okay. All right, so they inform ideas, stance, your tone, the values, commitments and beliefs of narrative therapy. It's all in that book. And it's also, one thing about narrative therapy is you also have to do some bit of self realization of your own values and norms and your own morals, because your client might tell you a story which goes totally opposite to your values. Or sometimes they tell you a story which is opposite to your moral system. And you as a counselor are not allowed to judge. you just sit there and you listen to the story and make sure that the use of self is you don't show any sort of disgust, judgment, or anything. You sit there, you smile, and you just continue as normal, sort of, because what's happening in that person's life might be normal to them. Your life, if you tell them your story might sound abnormal to your client. So everyone's life story is their normal or their normality, and we need to recognize it as counselors. So collaboration, it's important that you and your client work together, you're a team. Important, the person consulting the therapist plays a significant part in mapping the direction of their journey and the journey you're going to take to them. So you work together, right? You're not the one that's going to be deciding where we're going to go. You don't draw the map and say, and that's the difference between some psychological plans and stuff, is where we say it's going to take you X amount of sessions, and this is where I'm going to go, and this is, with narrative is there's no plan. You as a counselor don't have a plan. We're mapping the story with our client as we go on, because the client's the expert. So we map the story, we continue with our client, we journey with our client. Right? So they work with you. Therapist seeks to understand what is of interest to the people consulting them and how the journey is suiting their life. So it's interesting, your journey is interesting, I'm following your journey, I'm following you, I'm seeing what's happening in your life, I'm listening to your story, and you tell your story, and we go on with your story. So this is how we do it. You will often hear, for example, a narrative therapist ask the following questions. How is this conversation going for you? In other sessions, we'll say that that's sort of a feedback thing. How's this going? How's the counseling going? How are you finding the counseling? With narrative, we talk about conversation. So how is this conversation? Because we're having a chat. How's this conversation? Should we keep talking about this, or would you like to talk about something more interesting? So maybe your client's telling a story and they're starting to really get bored of their own story. Do you want to continue talking about your mother, or do you want to talk about something more interesting? Not that your mother's not interesting, but what do you want to talk about? Is this interesting to you? Is this what we should spend our time talking to you about? So they bring up a story. Remember also another thing is, and back to Rogers, the first thing your client comes to you is not the problem. And the way we deal is they always come to break the ice. So they'll say to you, I want to talk to you about my boss at work. And you're like, oh, what's the boss? And I get very upset. So in the end we talk about, oh, you've got anger issues. So the problem that you actually want to talk to me about is your aggression or your anger. It's not your boss. So most of your clients will come, the first thing they'll come and talk to you about is not the issue. So be aware of that. There's always deeper stuff, always more important stuff. They'll always have the soft one, the easy one, and just the 5 minutes before the session ends, they'll throw the big one down. And that's where you have to stop the session. You do not continue. Your session is an hour long. If they drop the big bomb 5 minutes before, we're going to stand, let's say to them, it's a good place to stop now. Can we start there next week or next session? You don't have to see them only once a week. You can see them twice a week. It's just, we don't see them for more than an hour. That's just too much on them and on you. Okay, so, right, I was wondering if you would be more interested in me asking you some more about this, or focus on this, or so you sort of delve into their story by saying, do you think it'll be more interesting? I was just wondering, would we sort of add to the story if I talk to you or ask you more about this or ask you more about that? So you draw out the story out of your client. Right, so you sort of, sometimes I feel like the narrative therapist is like an English teacher at school that's got to draw out a story out of their students. And this is what you and I will do, is we'll draw out a story, which is their life story, out of them. Okay, so it's working together, collaboration. Understanding and living our lives through their stories. So we all live our lives through stories. We all grow up with stories. Grandfather told me stories. Grandmother told me stories. Bedtime stories. Our whole life is about stories. It's like, do you have a story for me? So, or what's your story? Your kids come home, what happened today at school? They've got this whole story of what happened today at school. It's stories. We live with stories. So we use this now in therapy. Narratherapy is sometimes known as involving reauthoring or restoring conversations. So we're telling the story, our client tells the story, and then when we talk about restoring, is when we tell the story in a different way, where we change the ending. So my life is now this, I'm a wreck, my life's falling apart. Okay, let's retell the story now after therapy. How can you tell the story without your life falling apart? Making changes, making positive changes in this old story. The word story has different associations, understandings for different people. For narratives, our story consists of events. They're linked in sequence. So events is stuff that happens in your client's life and the sequence that they're linked in. Across the time period. So the story might have started when you were in primary school, when a specific, let's say a bullying incident happened, or a teacher said something which actually influenced your whole life being because it was something really challenging or demanding, or even something that really broke you down. Sometimes stories, a teacher might say something which is a life-changing story that will change the direction of your life, the focus of your life, or it might be something negative. Same with parents, same with friends, same with brothers, sisters, whatever. So you draw those stories out and you try and focus on the stories to make it more positive. Okay, and then you look at the, according to a plot. You look at the plot of the story like a normal story. There's a plot. What's the story happening? The plot is about my life, all the wrong decisions I've made. Instead of going this way, I went that way. Instead of choosing the non-criminal road, I chose the criminal road. Instead of, it's like you listen to this story, you listen to the plot, you listen to the main character, which is your client. Your client's always the main character, right? Sometimes your client is the villain in the story. Sometimes your client's the good guy in the story. Sometimes things happen to your client, but they remain the main character in the narrative story. So, as humans, we are interpreting beings. We all have daily experiences of events that we seek to make meaningful. The stories we have about our lives are created through linking certain events together in a particular sequence. So we link events together. And that's the role of us as counselor is we take event A, let's say the death of a loved one. Okay? And that event we choose a path of destruction. So we go on a path of destruction, get into depression, or we can take this route where we say we positive change, choices. We also get depression there, but we also get help. So it's always the story, there's always links. Something happens. So the story of this person's depression and which also destruction in their lives where they don't have relationships with people can be linked to the death of a father. Where in this side the person went through this whole process, but the link is also a death of father or mother or grandmother or whatever. But there's always links. So you as a counselor need to try and find these links in the story. It's like things don't happen without a reason. There are always links in people's lives. Always. There's a movie, quite an older movie now. It's called Sliding Doors.
Oh, yeah.
It's about someone on a train and taking this train or missing the train, that sort of thing. And a lot of our client stories are like this. It's like it's choices. Our life is about choices. What choice do you make, and how do you make that choice, and what do you do with that choice, that sort of thing. We've got stories about lives, relationships. They occur simultaneously. We don't have it's not like a specific episode of of Home and Away, where only today we focus on the Braxtons. And it's like there's a lot of stuff happening. Okay, right, okay, not Home and Away format, Neighbours, where we focus on the Ramsey, the people of Ramsey Street. So it's like, it's just different, right? There's a lot of stuff happening at the same time in people's lives. Okay? So you as a counsellor just need to focus on that. So here are some of the tools to be a narrative therapist. One is collaborate with the person or the family in coming up with a mutually accepted name for the problem. Right, this is where we talk about externalizing. So you find a good and mutually accepted name for the problem. Let's say your client comes to you with OCD. He's got OCD, so he's got rituals, like let's say I wash my hands 10 times before I leave the bathroom. If I close the front door, I need to touch the front door 6 times, that sort of stuff. If I don't do that, something bad's going to happen. All sorts of rituals. So this guy comes to you, he's got all these rituals. So what do you do with him is you get to him to tell you, explain what OCD if OCD was a person. Remember last week when we did the sort of CBT combination thing, the role play? I said to Mel, I said to her, can you explain to me what fear looks like? So we sort of personalized the issue. So in this case, let's say OCD. OCD is a man with a very, very nice suit, perfect tie, and we give him a name. Let's say we call him Ben. So we externalize the issue and we give it a name. So now when we talk about OCD, we don't say, well, how did you react? Or what? You say, what happened when Ben showed up? How did you react when Ben showed up? What did you do? What do you do if Ben is not around? So we're not saying that you're the problem, you're the issue, you're OCD. It's also not your OCD. It's like, it's me and my OCD. Or, hi, I have OCD. No, it's like, hi, it's me, and I've got a friend who comes and visits me, and his name is Ben, and he's OCD. So it sort of distances the two. It makes it easier also to work on that part, because it's not you. So that's why we externalize, and we get a mutually acceptable name. Let your client come up with the name. Sometimes they come up with weird names. Sometimes they just name it what it is. Anxiety. Anxiety looks like, what did Mel say? Anxiety looks like lots of hair, like Einstein. Right, so that's her vision. We can let your client come up with the name, right? And it must be a bit of an acceptable name. So we try and be a bit moral there with the names. Let the names just be above board. Right, number 2 is personify the problem, okay? And attribute positive, oppressive intentions and tactics to. So now I've got Ben, which is OCD. And now you tell me what his intentions and tactics. So when Ben shows up, what happens? Ben wants me to act this way, or Ben makes me angry, or when Ben comes, I'm getting upset. What's his tactic? His tactic is to make me annoyed. So you get to this place, you identify the problem, and you give it tactics. You talk about the tactics and inventions. So you personalize this person or this issue. So the person will know. It's sort of knowing the triggers in an easier way. Instead of saying to a person, what's the triggers that make you OCD? Or what's the triggers that make you angry? Or what's the triggers that make you depressed? Or we get to, okay, now we have, what's his tactics? What's his plan? It's a very good one to work with teenagers too, because suddenly funny enough, when you work with teenagers, they normally end to be like a superhero or a villain. That's normally the pictures that teenagers will come up when you externalize with them. Right, then we get to investigate how the problem has been disruptive, dominating and discouraging the person or the family. So now we talk about the problem, Ben. So whenever Ben shows up, okay, what does it do to the family? It makes like, I don't want anyone in my room because they're going to contaminate my room. They're going to poison my room because they all have germs. So this is what happened. Or what happens when Ben shows up in the bathroom? It's like, I just want to make sure I wash my hands, so that there are no germs. What disruption does it bring to your family? Oh, my sister wants to use the bathroom and we're always late for school, but it takes me so long to wash my hands, that sort of stuff. So you get to talk about the disruptions, the impact of the issue on the family. Right? Discover moments when the client hasn't been dominated or discouraged by the problem. So now we talk about, can you tell me a time when Ben wasn't there? Can you tell me what happens when Ben isn't around? When the anger isn't around, when fear isn't around, when anxiety isn't around? Can you talk about a time when it wasn't there? So this is sort of trying to get the client to know the difference, how he or she acted before and how they act now, or how they act when this fear or anxiety or issue, in this case we called him Ben, isn't around. How do they act? So it's just trying to show, but it's not you showing, it's them showing. So it's them revealing, it's them sort of finding out what's going on. Right, then also one way is, and I personally think it's like monuments, find historical evidence to bolster a new view of the person as competent enough to have stood up or defeated the issue. So let the client tell you stories where they actually had OCD show up, or where they had anxiety show up, or where they had anger show up, or fear, or whatever show up, and where they overcame it. So I did this, I was there and this happened, but I didn't allow it to control me. That sort of stuff. I call it the monument period. So find monuments, find victories, find situations where they overcame the issue. And then you use that to boost their positivity, knowing that they can overcome it, knowing that they have overcome it before. Sometimes it helps to, when they're in that sort of situation again, that they actually remember when they really beat this. So it's just a moment which we talk about. Right, and then we're talking about the future. And this is where we change or re-story. So we've got this story, we have this person now, my life's falling apart, let's say I've got fear of people, I've got agoraphobia, I don't want to go anywhere, I'm stuck in my house. So now we talk about, how do you think, let's talk about a positive future. You've overcome this issue. What are you going to do? How is your future going to look? My future is I'm going to go to football games with my children, because then I can, or someone will say, I can actually go to the shop, so I see myself going to Woolworths and buying food myself, not sending people, that sort of thing. So you re-story it, where you include the future. So I know now OCD or Ben or anxiety or whatever is ruling, but how would your future look if we get rid of it? How do you want your future? That sort of thing. So this is sort of, it says, describe a time when you will be free from temper tantrums, or from anorexia, or from no matter what issue your client's dealing with. Find or create an audience for receiving the new identity and the new story. So this is normally where loved ones come in, or a spouse or partner, or where you actually find an audience and say, this is my story, and this is what I want to become, and this is where I want to go, and this is what I'm working towards. Okay, so you find an audience. It's sort of almost like finding someone to be accountable to, and say, this is what I want to become. So it's sort of finding let's say audience, but finding someone to really journey along the way with you, and not only you as the counselor. We must be aware that we can't be everything for our clients. So we can't always be the one to be there for the client to help them out. We got a 1 hour session a week, or maybe 1 hour session 2 times a week, or whenever. They need someone else in the outside world that help them. Advantages. And this is a question for 506A. Mention the advantages and limitations. So advantages is decrease unproductive conflict between people, including disputes over who is responsible for the problem. So when we externalize a problem, we're not going to go and say, it's you're the problem, you're the issue. So we'll say that OCD is the issue, or anxiety is the issue, not you. So that's one thing. Undermines a sense of failure, where people will say, I'm a failure, I'm a problem, I'm angry, I'm aggressive, I'm this, I'm that. Now it's externalized. That is the issue. It's not me, that's the issue, but we are working on this issue. So it takes away the sense of failure, paves the way for people to cooperate with each other, to unite in a struggle against the problem. So let's work together to solve the issue of anxiety, or your issue of fear, or your issue of depression, or your issue of anorexia, or your issue of OCD. Okay? It's like we work together. Opens up new possibilities for people to take action and get back their lives and their relationships from the problem. Frees people to make a lighter, more effective and less stressed approach to serious problems. It's more acceptable. It's an easier approach, and presents options for dialogue about the problem. So we're talking, we're telling stories. We're telling stories about how you reacted when OCD showed up, how you reacted when this happened, when you were in the building and you froze because of fear. What happened? Tell me the story. It's not like really, this is therapy and we have to deal with therapy now. The next one is limitations. And limitations are, or ask away the client's responsibility from the problem. This is the thing that can happen, is that your client might feel that they are not responsible. So be aware of this. This is one issue that may come up, is we're moving it so far away from your client that your client might say, I'm not responsible, it's that thing. It's sort of that old excuse, the devil made me do it. You say, I didn't do it, the devil made me do it. I remember the cricketer Hansie Cronje, when he was caught for match fixing in South Africa. There was a big court case, and he actually took the stand and he said that the devil made me do it in the court. So taking no responsibility for his actions. So make sure that that's not what happens to your client, where they say, it's all the OCD's fault, I have no control over that. They do have some sort of control. This approach seems applicable for children and adolescents. I wonder how adults would accept naming their problem. So sometimes adults have a bit of an issue. Sometimes it's easier to do with women. Men sometimes struggle. Sometimes men struggle to think creative. We are not all as creative as women are. Sometimes you have men who can easily get this concept. So that's why I sometimes feel for men, I still feel that CBT is a better approach for men, but that's just a personal issue. There may be some clients who decline to participate in externalizing the problem. There's some of your clients who don't want to do it. They simply don't want to go there. So if they don't want to go there, just ignore it. Okay? If they don't want to go there, it's not happening. Don't force your client into a therapy which is not working. Right, and narrative therapy views the person as not being broken, which is a good thing now. It's not a limitation. It views the person as not being broken. The person is not the problem is the problem, as our friend Carl Rogers says. In this sense, you are not saying that there is something faulty with the person. narrative therapy helps people become authors of their own stories which describe and shape their lives. So you just help the person to actually just get their story in order, get all the chapters back together.
Yeah.
Just help them to manage the story. Yeah, and I just found this has got nothing to do with narrative therapy, but it's just, I never learn anything talking, I only learn things when I ask questions. And this is us as counselors, we don't talk, all right? People are not paying to sit in a session and listen to your story, your issues, your problems, how you overcame them, because you're not a motivational speaker, you are a counselor, which is you listen, right? So you listen, and you listen by asking questions. You listen by, how do you do it? What are you going to do? So next Thursday's session, I want to talk about how to get your clients talking. Because sometimes we get those clients who don't want to speak, especially when they're forced. Sometimes people come to you because they want, it's easy when people want to speak to you, but especially if you work like in a school environment, you've got teenagers, and they have to come and see you. Sometimes they will not speak to you. So what do you do to get your clients to actually talk to you? So next week we're going to have a bit of a chat around how people talk. But that's the end of my talk of narrative therapy. We'll switch off all the cameras and then it's open for questions. Any questions?